Yeah, I'm not a fan of tariffs. They raise the prices for American consumers. I'm more of a free trade kind of Republican that remembers how many jobs are created by the exports.
Trump is back, and this time, he's shaking up the agricultural machinery industry in a way no one saw coming. With a bold plan to slap massive tariffs up to 200% on companies moving production overseas, he's turned his sights on giants like John Deere. But here's the twist. Massey Ferguson, the trusted tractor brand loved by farmers for decades, is now caught in a crossfire. As prices threaten to soar and farmers brace for impact, the stakes have never been higher. Could this bold move to protect American jobs end up destroying one of agriculture's most iconic brands?
We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again.
Looking at what Trump's aggressive America First stance means for manufacturing and why it's causing such a buzz in the agriculture machinery industry, Trump has always been vocal about his disdain for companies moving production overseas. In his latest push to make America great again, he's doubling down on this with a bold promise to slap hefty fines up to a staggering 200% on companies that dare to relocate their manufacturing abroad. Sounds dramatic, right? But this isn't just campaign talk. Trump's targeting specific industries and companies, and the farming sector is front and center.
A few days ago that they're going to move a lot of their manufacturing business to Mexico. I'm just notifying John Deere right now. If you do that, we're putting a 200% tariff on everything that you want to sell into the United States, so that if I win, John Deere is going to be paying a 200%.
Take John Deere, for instance. If you've ever been around tractors, you know this name carries weight. It's practically the king of the farming world. Recently, though, Deere announced plans to move some of its production to Mexico, and Trump wasn't having it. He outright threatened them with a 200% tariff on any equipment they try to bring back into the US. That's not just a slap on the wrist, it's a financial gut punch. And here's the kicker. Trump's targeting of John Deere doesn't just stop with them. The ripple effects are hitting the entire agricultural machinery market, dragging other players like Massey Ferguson into the crossfire. Why is Trump going so hard on this? The political context is key. Rural America has been his backbone of support. Farmers who felt left behind as manufacturing jobs vanished and costs skyrocketed. For them, outsourcing is a dirty word, a symbol of corporate greed leaving hardworking Americans in the dust. Trump's policies are his way of telling these communities, I've got your back. But the big question is whether these tariffs will help or hurt the very people they're meant to protect. Spoiler alert, it's a mixed bag. If you've been around long enough, or you know someone who has, you've probably heard of these iconic tractors. Massey Ferguson has been around since 1952, born from the merger of Massey Harris and the Ferguson Company. Over the decades, they've built a reputation for tough, dependable machines that get the job done. Farmers worldwide trust them, and that trust doesn't come easy. From introducing groundbreaking innovations like the three-point hitch system to constantly improving their machines, Massey Ferguson has earned its spot as a giant in the agricultural world. But here's the problem. Massey Ferguson isn't entirely made in America. Like many global brands, they rely on international production to keep costs down and stay competitive. This makes them incredibly vulnerable to Trump's tariffs. If Trump's 200% tariff hammer drops on John Deere, it's only a matter of time before Massey Ferguson feels the squeeze too. Their tractors, many of which are manufactured outside of the US, could suddenly become significantly more expensive to bring into the American market world. And that's the problem, not just for Massey Ferguson, but also for farmers who depend on their affordable equipment. As for their market position, Massey Ferguson is a strong competitor to John Deere. But let's face it, John Deere is the juggernaut here, holding over half the market share in large tractors. Massey Ferguson, while respected, doesn't have the same kind of dominance. If John Deere raises prices to offset tariffs, you'd think Massey Ferguson might gain some ground, right? Not so fast. Massey Ferguson doesn't have the infrastructure to handle a massive surge in demand without also hiking up their prices. That means farmers could be left with no good options, just higher costs across the board. Tariffs sound like a bold move to protect American jobs, but they can hit companies like Massey Ferguson hard. Here's why. When tariffs target imported agricultural machinery, it's like throwing a wrench into the gears of Massey Ferguson's business. The company manufactures much of its equipment outside the US, which means those hefty import tariffs could make their tractors significantly more expensive. For farmers already juggling rising costs, that's a nightmare. Massey Ferguson's tractors, known for being reliable and affordable, could suddenly become less competitive, driving farmers to rethink their options. And it's not just the price tag that's the problem. Tariffs can mess up supply chains too. Imagine trying to reroute an entire production system just to avoid paying sky-high fees. That's the kind of logistical headache Massey Ferguson would face if they decided to move production back to the US. We're talking about finding new facilities, hiring workers, and dealing with delays that could leave farmers waiting for essential equipment during critical planting and harvesting seasons. It's not as simple as flipping a switch. It's a massive, expensive overhaul. Now, think about the farmers in all of this. Many of them supported Trump's America First policies, believing they'd benefit from a stronger manufacturing sector. But when machinery costs start climbing, the reality sets in. Higher prices for tractors and other equipment means tighter budgets, and for some, it might even mean putting off buying new machinery altogether. Farmers are already dealing with rising costs for fuel and fertilizers. Add pricier tractors to the mix, and it's a recipe for frustration. They voted for policies that promised to help them, but instead, some might feel like they're paying the price. The tariffs don't just stop at Massey Ferguson. They shake up the entire agricultural machinery market, and John Deere is the final domino to fall. If John Deere raises its price to offset the tariffs, farmers could start looking to competitors like Massey Ferguson for cheaper alternatives. On paper, that sounds like a win for Massey Ferguson, right? But there's a catch. Massey Ferguson might not have the production capacity to meet the increased demand without bumping up their prices. It's a vicious cycle. No matter where farmers turn, they're likely to face higher costs. For farmers, this economic strain is like being stuck in a financial vice. They rely on affordable, reliable machinery to keep their operations running smoothly. If tariffs drive up costs across the board, farmers might be forced to make tough decisions, like delaying equipment purchases or cutting back on other investments. That doesn't just hurt individual farmers, it ripples throughout the entire agricultural sector, slowing down growth and squeezing already tight profit margins. Farming is hard enough without extra hurdles, and these tariffs could make it even tougher. Then there's the risk of retaliatory tariffs, and trust me, that's a whole other can of worms. We've seen this play out before during Trump's first term when countries like China hit back with tariffs on American agricultural exports. If history repeats itself, US farmers could lose access to key international markets, making it even harder to sell their crops. Lower sales and shrinking profits? That's not exactly the boost rural America was hoping for. On the surface, these tariffs are part of a larger strategy to bring manufacturing back home, and you've got to admit, that sounds pretty appealing. The idea is simple. If companies are slapped with high costs for outsourcing, they'll think twice before moving jobs overseas. Instead, they might keep production in the US, creating more jobs and boosting local economies. For many Americans, especially those in industries hit hard by outsourcing, this feels like a long overdue move to level the playing field. Trump's America First mantra resonates with a lot of people who've watched factories close and communities struggle as manufacturing jobs disappear. Supporters argue that these tariffs are a way to fight back against unfair trade practices and foreign competition. They see it as a wake-up call for big companies to stop chasing cheap labor abroad and start investing in American workers. And let's be honest, the idea of revitalizing the Made in America label does tug at the heartstrings. It's about more than just economics, it's about pride and independence. But here's the thing. Not everyone's convinced these tariffs are the slam dunk they're supposed to be. Trade experts and industry leaders are warning about some serious unintended consequences, and they got a point. For starters, let's talk about costs. When companies face tariffs on imported goods, they don't just eat those costs, they pass them on to consumers. That means you and I end up paying more for everything from tractors to groceries. Imagine the price tag on a Massey Ferguson tractor jumping because of tariffs. Farmers who are already stretched thin could be left scrambling to afford the tools they need. So what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.